At the same time, we must always balance. We must balance safety against just being a humanitarian. For instance, you know, if there's a rabid dog running around in your neighborhood, you're probably not going to assume something good about that dog, and you're probably going to put your children out of the way. Doesn't mean that you hate all dogs by any stretch of the imagination, but you're putting your intellect into motion and you're thinking, how do I protect my children? At the same time, I love dogs, and I'm going to call the Humane Society, and hopefully they can come take this dog away and create a safe environment once again. By the same token, we have to have in place screening mechanisms that allow us to determine who the mad dogs are, quite frankly. Who are the people who want to come in here and hurt us and want to destroy us? Until we know how to do that, just like it would be foolish to put your child out in the neighborhood knowing that that was going on, it is foolish for us to accept people if we cannot have the appropriate type of screen.
I think what's changed is we have, and I'm sad to say this because it's a low moment in our republic as far as I'm concerned. We have this circus, and that's what it is, a circus that's called the Republican campaign for the presidency in 2016. We have entertainers, we have neurosurgeons, we have former governors, we have people pretending to be Joe McCarthy. We have all sorts of characters in this, and they're trying to outdo each other in their outlandish rhetoric. And frankly, it's funny to watch in a sense, but it's also pathetic. And when it takes on these kind of proportions in response to something like what we've seen in Ankara, what we've seen in Beirut, what we saw today in Nigeria. How many people know today that 49 people died in suicide bomb attacks in Nigeria in towns called Kano and Yalo? These are things that we don't need to be exacerbating in the world. And this kind of rhetoric does just that.
Some of you in this room will serve on the front lines of that fight against ISIS and against radical Islamic terrorism. You will sign up for an uncertain fate on foreign fields of battle because your country and the cause of freedom are calling you.
Frankly, I can't believe that a Bush would say anything about another war in Southwest Asia, because that's clearly what he's talking about. But my passion really gets up when I think about it isn't going to be those people who are putting their boots on the ground in Syria, should it come to that. It's not going to be the Bushes. It's not going to be the Trumps. It's not going to be the Rubios. It's not going to be the Clintons. It's not going to be any of those people. It's going to be the poor kids from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maine, Oklahoma. That's who it's going to be.
The president refuses to say the words radical Islamic terrorism. Hillary Clinton refuses to say the words radical Islamic terrorism. But not only do they refuse to say the words, but they are supporting a policy of bringing tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees into this country, knowing full well that we cannot vet them to determine who is coming here to wage jihad.
My amendment says this, that we're not going to bring them here and put them on government assistance. When the poem beneath the Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, give me your poor," it didn't say, "Come to our country and we'll put you on welfare."
This moment, politically and rhetorically, that we're seeing in the States right now, in which a group of refugees fleeing violence has faced fear and discrimination from the American public and American leaders, is one that we've sadly seen before. As The Intercept points out, the anti-Syrian Muslim refugee rhetoric we hear today mirrors calls to reject Jewish refugees during the Nazi era, when refugees were derided as communists or anarchist infiltrators intent on spreading revolution, part of a global Jewish capitalist conspiracy to take control of the U.S., and Nazis in disguise. And as we see with Syrian refugees today, many rejected Jewish refugees simply because they weren't Christian. The Democratic mayor of Roanoke, Virginia, David Bowers, explained his opposition to allowing Syrian refugees in his city by pointing approvingly to the internment of Japanese Americans following the Pearl Harbor attacks, when anti-Japanese hysteria broke out among the American public.
And if Donald Trump and others who refer to Latinos as people from Mexico as criminals and rapists, If they want to open that door, our job is to shut that door and shut it tight.
It's time to wake up and smell the falafel. Something isn't going right in this open immigration policy.
Would you put it at
we are
zero?
importing terrorism.
I'm waiting for this president to call Eric Holder out of retirement to lead a new movement. Jihadi lives matter.
The widows and orphans I remember are the ones after 9/11, and I don't want to create a new generation of those.
Nobody wants to shut down religious institutions or anything, but, you know, you understand it. A lot of people understand it. We're going to have no choice.
Who in their right mind would want to bring over tens of thousands of Syrian refugees when we cannot determine, the administration cannot determine who is and who isn't a terrorist?
Local Islamic community has outgrown this building and is proposing to build a mosque nearby on property they own. But at last night's presentation, things turned ugly fast.
Right now, what we looking at this is evil. We'll do everything in my power to make sure that does not happen. We don't want it. Because you are terrorists. Every one of you are terrorists. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you think. You can smile at me. You can say whatever you want. But every Muslim is a terrorist.
France declared this state of emergency where they closed the borders and they established some degree of warrantless searches. I know how you feel about the borders, but do you think there's some kind of state of emergency here, and do we need warrantless searches of Muslims?
Well, we're going to have to do things that we never did before, and some people are going to be upset about it, but I think that now everybody is feeling that security is going to rule, and certain things will be done that we never thought would happen in this country in terms of information and learning about the enemy. Absolutely. And so we're going to have to do certain things that were frankly unthinkable a year ago. When you look at what's happening.
And in terms of doing this, to pull off the kind of tracking we need, do you think we might need to register Muslims in some type of database or note their religion on their ID?
Well, we're going to have to look at a lot of things very closely. We're going to have to look at the mosques. We're going to have to look very, very carefully.
Should there be a database system that tracks the Muslims here in this country?
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it. But right now we have to have a border, we have to have strength, we have to have a wall, and we cannot let what's happening to this country happen.
But that's something your White House would like to implement.
Oh, I would certainly implement that.
We are not well served when, in response to a terrorist attack, we descend into fear and panic. When candidates say we wouldn't admit 3-year-old orphans, that's political posturing. And I would add, by the way, these are the same folks oftentimes who suggest that they're so tough that just talking to Putin or staring down ISIL or using some additional rhetoric somehow is going to solve the problems out there. But apparently they're scared of widows and orphans coming into the United States of America as part of our tradition of compassion. You know, first they were worried about the press being too tough on them during debates. Now they're worried about 3-year-old orphans. That doesn't sound very tough to me.
Let me suggest something, Mr. President. If you want to insult me, you can do it overseas, you can do it in Turkey, you can do it in foreign countries. But I would encourage you, Mr. President, come back and insult me to my face. Let's have a debate on Syrian refugees right now. We can do it anywhere you want. I prefer it in the United States and not overseas where you're making the insults.
Is Obama now a threat to America's national security?
I think he's a threat to our country. I mean, he must have some kind of a thing going because, you know, when you see that he won't even call them by their name, after attack after attack after attack, and it's always the same thing, it's hatred. It's hatred. And it is exactly that. It's radical Islamic terrorism.
You suggested that there might be mosques in America that need to be shut down.
Well, you're going to have to do something. They're coming out of some bad things are happening, and a lot of them are happening in the mosque, and you're going to have to do something. Nobody wants to shut down religious institutions or anything, but, you know, you understand it. A lot of people understand it. We're going to have no choice. There's absolutely no choice.
The United States should not delay in leading a global coalition to take out ISIS with overwhelming force. Militarily, we need to intensify our efforts in the air and on the ground. While air power is essential, it cannot bring the results we seek. The United States, in conjunction with our NATO allies and more Arab partners, we'll need to increase our presence on the ground.
Which is why I said that, look, at a minimum, we ought to be bringing in people that have, like, orphans and people that clearly aren't going to be terrorists, or Christians. There are no Christian terrorists in the Middle East. They're persecuted, religious minorities.
So what does the focus on Christian families actually look like? Is that going to...
What, you're a Christian? I mean, you can prove you're a Christian.
How?
I think you can prove it. If you can't prove it, then you err on the side of caution.
I'm going to bomb the out of them. It's true. I don't care. I don't care. They've got to be stopped. Refugees are pouring into our great country from Syria. We don't even know who they are. They could be ISIS. They could be anybody. What's our president doing? Is he insane?
In Tennessee, a top GOP lawmaker called for the National Guard to round up any Syrian refugees who have recently settled in the state and forcibly remove them. And in Indiana, GOP Governor Mike Pence turned away 2 Syrian refugees who had been preparing to live in his state. Though Democratic Connecticut Governor Dannel Malloy today met with one of the families, a shopkeeper, his wife, and their 5-year-old son, who've been living as refugees for 4 years, and offered them a home in his state.
I told them that people in the United States are generous and good people, but sometimes things happen elsewhere that cause people to forget about their generosity and to forget about their native warmth. They know that they've been diverted. They know that they were unwelcome in another state, and you know, we're not in a position to take everybody from Syria. But Connecticut should take its share.